Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are all having a great weekend. I am about ready to start, getting some glass laid down on all these patches of the deck that we opened up for drying. Now, when I initially cut these tops off, among these areas that I've shown you in the past, I was getting moisture readings that were somewhere between 40 to 50%, which is waterlogged. I mean, it's wet. And over the course of probably a week and a half, the moisture content has come down to anywhere, again it varies, anywhere between 8 to 12%, which is about as dry as it's going to get, in our area, air dried. If you were to kiln dry it, like lumber that you buy in the lumber store that's kiln dried, it's going to be a little bit drier than that. But typically air dried stuff is, right in that ballpark. So we're ready to start glassing. Now, before I get started on that, there's a couple things that I need to do. I need to come in and I want to pre-coat all of this exposed wood or all the exposed coring, and help to also fill in some gaps, between some of the wood planks, as well as just kind of smooth it over a little bit. Right now, unless I were to do a lot of sanding, which would make that material a little bit thinner, I'm going to try and find a happy medium. I'm going to build some of it up, and I'm going to end up sanding some of it off. But when it's all said and done, I will be removing less material this way. So that's kind of the plan. I'm going to be building and sealing all this off with peanut butter. I mean, you've heard me talk about that before. And in this video right over here, which if you haven't seen it, check it out. When I was making that hatch mold, it was when I was fiberglassing over plywood. That's what it was. I kind of roughly went through the process of how I make the peanut butter, but I never really got into the details. And I've gotten a lot of questions from people as far as, well, what's the filler to resin ratio, and how much are you putting in? And I never really know, because it really depends, I guess. Depending on what it is you're trying to do. Like for this, when I go over the main, the majority of the area on here to pre-coat this coring, I'm going to want it a little bit more on the wet side, because I want that resin to soak into the coring and seal it off, so that my glass is going to have something to to kind of hold on to. Now, on the other end of that scale, if we were making, say, fillets, for trying to put a radius around the corner so that the glass can conform to that, you're going to want it a little bit thicker. You're not going to want it, to sag and run out of its place. You're going to want it to, be stiff enough to stay in place. So, as far as the, how much material, how much fibers do you add, or how much Cabasol do you add? It really depends, and there really is no secret recipe per se. But at least I'm going to try and put together somewhat of a ballpark, measurements for you here. So I've got 8 ounces of resin here, and this is uncatalyzed laminating poly resin. And I'm going to start, and I actually have the correct material this time. Last time, I took some chop strain and I just kind of took some scissors to it and sliced it up. This is actually milled fibers, and it's almost like a powder. I mean, it's milled very, very small. Again, depending on what it is that you're going to be using this peanut butter for, they also make shaved glass, which is that comes in like 1/4 inch or 3/16 or 1/8 inch lengths, which are basically short little strands of glass. That's going to offer a little bit stronger material. It's just like the more glass there is in the mixture, the stronger it's going to be. The application that we're going to be doing here, we're not going for strength at all. I'm just looking for a nice paste that's going to be easy to work with, and it's not going to, I guess for lack of better words, just be a big giant ball of snot that I'm trying to smear across the coring here. So I'm going to want something that's going to be nice and smooth, just a nice fine texture, so it'll be easier to smooth out and just give me a good base to start with. So we've got. I always start by adding the glass first. So I've got some milled fiber. And I'm not going to dig my hands in here and actually measure it out, but I'm going to just kind of go by how many scoops that I'm going to put in here. Okay, so there's one scoop. I'd say, if I had to guess, I'd say it's maybe 1/3 of an ounce. And again, these are all going to be very similar measurements. So that's 2, 3, 11, 12. Now the milled fibers, this is not going to make it thick. That's what the Cabasil is going to do. So so in this instance, I'm going to have a lot more of the milled fibers than I am the Cabasil. I guess right now the only thing that the milled fibers is doing is just to give the resin a little bit more body, I guess. If I had to guess, I'd say in this 8 ounces of resin, I probably mixed in 1/3, 1/4 to 1/3 a cup of the milled fibers, give or take. Okay, now this stuff. This is the Cabasil, or it's silica. It's fumed silica is what Cabasil is. Now this stuff is basically as light as air. So, trying to use this stuff outside, if there's any kind of a breeze, is not gonna turn out well for you. So, it's extremely light and airy. So I'm gonna be very careful when I'm scooping it and putting it in here, and when I'm stirring it, not to get it airborne, because it is extremely light, and this is just not something you want to be breathing into your lungs. Now, as I mentioned, I'm gonna want to have this, on the wet side, just because of what I'm doing. Now, if I wanted this thicker, it would just be a matter of adding more Cabasil. So, if you really wanted an actual paste, you'd probably do close to equal amounts of the glass or of the milled fibers and the Cabasil, possibly a little bit more Cabasil, but probably pretty close to half and half to start, get you in the ballpark. Yeah, that's almost like a gravy, which is about what I'm looking for. Now, as far as other things that you can use, this mixture for, peanut butter, just using this project as an example, I'm going to most likely be using this to come back in and fill all of the old screw holes from the previous teak deck, and I have no idea how many holes there are. I'm guessing a few thousand in here. Now with that amount of area that needs to get filled, this is a very economical way to go about that. You could also use epoxy, but it is much more expensive, and really for this application there would be no added benefit of using epoxy for that. The new deck itself is going to be bonded down with epoxy, with their fitting epoxy, from Teak Decking Systems. So it's still going to have an epoxy coating over it, just looking to basically fill the holes and seal them up so that I guess belt and suspenders kind of an approach. I could probably get away with not even sealing these holes, and when I'm laying the deck down, just make sure that I force some of that fitting epoxy into these holes. That would probably be perfectly fine. But belt and suspenders, I'm going to come in and try and seal these, and fill these holes first. Also, like on this, on this coring here, and when you're laying in new sections of coring in general, you're going to have areas where two different pieces of coring material kind of butt up together, and a lot of times there's going to be a slight little gap, in between those two pieces of material. You can use this stuff for filling in, thin gaps. If you changed the filler that you use a little bit, if you were to come in and add micro balloons, I believe is what they're called, or glass spheres, then that basically turns the resin into almost of a fairing compound. It sands because the resin itself becomes displaced by the little glass spheres. It becomes a very airy mixture and easy to sand. So it could be another economical way for making your own fairing compound if you want to have a polyester-based fairing compound. Well, I guess just as a little side note, I started with 8 ounces of resin, and with the material that I added in, the fiber and the Cabasil, I've displaced 3 ounces. So right now my cup is up to 11 ounces. So I don't know, I suppose if you want to use that as another way to gauge, you know, how much material to be adding for the resin, like I said, it really depends, and there is no actual recipe, but just thought I'd mention that. Okay, now mech. Let's see, in 8 ounces of resin, if I want it at 1%, I think I use 2.5 cc's. So I'm gonna go just a little bit over. Oh, and I should add also that if you're going to be making a thick batch of peanut butter, you're going to want to catalyze your resin before you add too much to it and it gets too thick. Otherwise, you're not going to get even distribution of the hardener in the resin after it's already pre-thickened. So in this instance, this is perfectly fine. I'll just make sure I give it a good stirring for a minute or two. Oh, and also, well, as long as I'm just sitting here stirring, if you're mixing up large batches, once you add the catalyst, you're on the clock now. Because a large cup of resin will start to get warm and start kicking off on you within just a couple of minutes. So whatever you have in your bucket, you're going to need to dump it out so it's in a thinner layer, so you have more working time with it. Well, in this particular area, there are no holes that go all the way through the deck. Now, there are some areas in here that do have that. So, before you go and you pour a big batch of resin out, over an entire area, make sure that there aren't any holes going through that's going to allow the resin to drip through into the interior. I think that looks pretty decent for a first coat. And again, it doesn't need to look pretty because it is gonna get sanded a little bit. I'm just trying to, I guess, like I mentioned, find that happy medium between filling and actually sanding, so that I'll have to do a little less sanding and a little less filling to get everything nice and smooth for laying the glass over the top. So, but yeah, so I think this looks good. Now I'm just gonna mix up another batch of resin and move on to the next spot. Now moving on to a different section. This area is just, I don't know, a few feet aft of what we just worked on. Now, in this particular area, the Jenny track, or the Genoa track, was mounted right up, and extended right down to about here. So there are, a few mounting holes that go all the way through the deck. Now, the way that I'm gonna, I guess, try and plug those is I'm just gonna take some paper towel and I guess ball it up as tight as I can and then just jam it into the hole. So right now the main hope, or the main, what I'm trying to do, is just to prevent resin from actually soaking down, and through into the interior. And at this point, I think I'm gonna end this video here. Now next week, we're gonna cover laying all of our glass down, getting that ground down, and then prepped for fairing so that we can start to look at getting this cabin top painted. The new teak decks are gonna be arriving here at the shop in probably two to 3 weeks. So I want to try and have all of this painting work done before that actually happens. As always, if you have any questions, comments, please leave those down below. And until next time, thanks for watching.